Denise, would you like to start first? Citizens to Protect Mont Lorne area?
Sure.
Oh,
Thank you very much for letting me speak to this tonight. Seeing the presentations and seeing what activities Cantley 1889 has been doing just seems to bring full circle some of the communications recently from Eva on the need for citizen action committees and for us to meet and talk. And I know many of you have known each other, and I've known many of you incidentally a little bit, but I really have lived here in Cantley for 18 years, and it's only in the last couple of years that I've come to really appreciate what we have. And Mount Lorne is one of them. It was John Olmsted and Dave Snyder who took us up there to the peak of Mont Lorne a couple of years ago. And I live right beside it. I didn't know the name of it. I had explored the base of it, but never been up to the top. And it is the only undeveloped area along the Gatineau riverfront, as well as a pretty much virgin mountain that exists south of Ferrelton along the Gatineau River. It has all sorts of species which are at risk, including the whippoorwill, which are disappearing in southern Quebec, and several centuries-old red and white oaks that somehow survived local logging, so they're magnificent. So many of you have been aware of this, perhaps more than me over the years, but I think that I've learned also that Mont Lorne is very little known outside of a few people, and maybe better appreciated from the people who live on the opposite shore of the Gatineau in Farm Point, because they get a magnificent view of it and the sunrise over the mountain on in the mornings. And there are many of our group who have come from the Chelsea side because they really appreciate what is there, and they've canoed and hiked over to the other side. So anyway, there is a development proposal to build roads in that mountain and create 500 lots for homes. And by some strange decision of a previous municipal council, they wanted to allow the developer to bypass some new rules that were put in place by the MRC to prohibit the building of new roads in zones that are recreational and tourist zones. And instead of applying those new prohibitions to prevent this kind of development, they gave them, or purported to give them, an acquired right to build roads and divide this property into lots. And several citizens were concerned when we learned of it. And we learned of it because the developer themselves went through a kind of public consultation in November last year. But that's the last of the consultations, because it was really a pseudo consultation as far as I'm concerned. They submitted their proposal and they were trying to go ahead, and they've threatened a lawsuit against the municipality if they don't give them their acquired right. So many of us tried to press them on this to say that they didn't have to go ahead with an acquired right because it was the old council and some of the provisions weren't in place. But they're afraid of the developer. They're willing to stand by the decision of the previous council, and they also think they'll get more tax revenues from the $1 million lots they could get along the river and up in the summit of Mont Lorne. But there are many of us who have been fighting that, and we are at the point where we believe that the only way to fight it is to challenge the notion of an acquired right for the developer. So we've retained a lawyer to give us advice about this acquired right. It's a very technical area of law and municipal decisions, and we're waiting for that decision. But in the meantime, we're actually beginning to raise funds to challenge this, and we'll need to raise a significant amount if we have to go to court. We hope that perhaps in a settlement we could still convince the developer not to go ahead with this. And the economy is changing, so there are some unpredictable circumstances that may occur. But really at this stage we want to be able to challenge the cowardice, if you will, of the municipality trying to give over this right, or this notion of a right, when the entire impetus of, you know, the world and the province and of Canada should be to preserving natural spaces of this kind and better protection for the species at risk. We have also lobbied the federal and provincial governments, the ministries of the environment, and they're all talk and no action as best as we can see. They're not really jumping on board with this, but we're continuing to press for some attention from them. And in the meantime, we do believe that sometimes citizens' actions and ultimately the courts may be one of the only ways of stopping this at this stage. The project, it hasn't been passed yet. There was an original version submitted in the winter, and then they were sent back to the drawing board. They had to do some tweaks to the project and also do a biological study on Mont Lorne in the 3 seasons of spring, summer, and fall. So that's where that's at. And it's a worthwhile project. I think we need to talk some more, but if you're willing as an organization to share our letter, which gives more information with your members, we would really appreciate that. So that's
Yes.
it from my end, unless there's any questions.
I'd like to think that Cantley 1889's role is like a facilitator, a place where we are willing to support whatever you're doing, because it's part of our mandate. So yes, anything you'd like us to do, especially sending information to members, we'd be very happy to do it, and anything else. And we'd like you to keep in touch with us, and we'd like all the groups to keep in touch with each other. I really believe that we're stronger together.
Yeah,
and
it's
I think most of the
to watch
people
how it's
here,
all coming together, Margaret, because it's you know, I think it's a growing movement. People find that their governments at all levels, or municipalities, provincial or federal governments, they're simply not responding. They're not providing the kind of leadership and that kind of monitoring by citizens. It's a heavy burden, as you know, as your own organization has carried, you know, the job of documenting and promoting. It's a heavy burden on citizens to have to enforce these things, but it seems to be the only real way of getting accountability and proper decision making. And this one
yes,
is still to be determined.
unfortunately, yes, you're right. Yes, to answer your question, we would be very willing to help you. Just keep in touch with us. Let us know what you're doing, and we'll pass any information along. And personally, I'd like to, you know, if you're looking for funding pledges, I meant to do it, but I personally would like to make sure that I help as well that way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Margaret. And I'll forward on the documentation for you after the meeting.
Okay, is there anyone else that has a comment or any questions? I really admire Denise and the other people for, you know, for creating these groups and to working so hard. It's
well, just as we've seen with other committees, you know, Dave Snyder's been involved, Joanna Dean, Dave Wilson.
Same people.
Yeah, same people. It's often the same people. Yes.
Yeah.
Mike
Thank you,
Rosen, too.
everyone who is there.
Denise, I have a question.
Ouch.
Okay, is the goal to stop the development? Is the goal to limit the development? Is there a certain area that geographic area that you're focusing, or is it basically that Mont Lorne, that, yeah, like what do you, is there a line in the sand sort of thing? Like what's the goal?
We did try to discuss, you know, limiting it and setting aside its most precious elements. You know, the summit, the centuries-old trees, the riverfront. But you know, the rules are very restrictive. 10% is all you can hope for, it seems, out of the municipal negotiations. So that's inadequate. Our vision for the mountain and the riverfront is a natural reserve with possible public access trails to the summit and perhaps to a small portion of the riverfront. but really it's as a reserve that we think its greatest value exists. And that's our vision. We recognize that there may be a need for some compromise somewhere, but I don't think we're there yet. You know, if we can defeat this notion of an acquired right, then we may be able to preserve it much more largely than 10% or 20% of the mountain.
Great, thank you.
David?
I'm in there. So we have not had the benefit of seeing the biological studies done by the developer. The municipality and developer have refused to share those with us, so we don't know what they've. What we do have is the information that Carl Saviak, in his own time, unpaid, gathered on the mountain, and he's found 13 endangered species so far, and that was just one person looking around. A very skilled person, don't get me wrong, well, 30 odd years experience. So the areas that he identified are on different parts of the mountain. They're not all lumped together. So you have exceptional forests, you have the summit, you have wetlands, you have valleys where there's endangered species that are unique to that particular location. So it's very difficult when you're saying, it's like choosing amongst your children, like which of the children will survive, and so it's unfortunate that when the land was available for sale, that we were not aware, as engaged at that point, and that we weren't able to get Nature Conservancy or somebody involved to acquire the property. But I think I agree with Denise, is that we need to, get the municipality and the developer to come to the table and understand the importance of preserving this, and then actually it's to the benefit of the municipality and even the developer to preserve as much of the mountain as possible.
I have a question, Denise. It's Jennifer Leighton speaking. I was involved in this group before it was called Citizens to Protect Mount Lorne, and my understanding is that if that acquired right was defeated, then the project wouldn't be allowed at all because it's outside the urban perimeter, and the MRC schema, the current one, limits new developments to the urban perimeter. Am I wrong in my understanding?
Not exclusively to the urban perimeter, but to existing road work. So they wouldn't allow new roads to be built in the tourist districts. The what do you call it? Recreational and tourist zones.
So effectively, the project wouldn't go forward then.
It couldn't go forward with its current plan, that's for sure. Some homes along the road could be developed, but not along the riverfront and not up on the summit, because they couldn't get the roads up if we were able to defeat this.
The original plan that we saw back in 2020 or 20, anyway, was the phase 1 was along Mont-Cascades Road. And then phase 2 was pushing in down towards the river and around both sides of the mountain. Now there's 8 phases. Phase 8 is the straightening of the road around the chalet at Mont-Cascades ski resort. But what went to council was phases 1, 2, and 3. And what we were trying to do was to say, well, 10% for the whole, we want to 10% for the whole, all phases 1 through 7 to be lumped together so that you have a large contiguous area and try to cover as many of the endangered species and exceptional forests as possible. And we were told by the municipality, oh no, you only get the 10% of phases 1, 2, and 3 at this point, because the other ones are not, haven't come forward yet. So some of the other phases are to the east of Mont-Cascades Golf Course, not actually on the mountain. So again, they're still working in this 1950s model where you have a subdivision of lots and you have a park with swings and a teeter-totter. So that they just don't seem to get it when it comes to conservation and preserving biodiversity and the impacts in terms of what all the ecological services provided by these forests.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dave.